welcome to the IT's Her Future Women in Technology podcast. If you wish to reach out to us, please do so through our email itsherfuture@kpmg.co.uk. I'm your host Neve, and this week we'll be discussing the topic of female leadership within the technology industry. We'll be discussing how to develop leadership skills, your pathway to becoming a leader, issues faced by women as they rise up the corporate ladder, and how the IT sector is evolving. I'd like to welcome Anne Gozel and Dawn Kelso, two leaders in technology consulting at KPMG. If you'd just like to introduce yourself with a bit of background about yourself and your current role. So Anne, would you like to start?
Hi, my name's Anne Gozel. I'm a partner within FS Technology Strategy. I sit within Connected Tech overall. I've been at KPMG for 7 years now. I've been in consulting overall within tech consulting for about 9 to 10 years. It's a second career for me, so I actually started my working life as a barrister, bit of a career change. And I came to KPMG, I joined as a C grade and have sat in technology roles ever since. And I actually recently made partner as of officially only a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations on that achievement, Anne. And Dawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dawn Kelso. I lead a Microsoft data practice. So my official job title is Head of Data. And I've been at KPMG for 2 years now. I joined as a senior manager and I've just recently passed my director promotion panel. Prior to joining KPMG, I worked in industry. So I wasn't a consultant before I came here. Instead, I worked my way up from an analyst through to a developer. And then I spent the last 10 years as a head of department. So running data and business intelligence teams in various different industries. So transport, retail, media, etc.
Great, thank you. And congratulations to you too, Dawn. So the first question I'd like to ask you both is, have you always wanted to be a leader, and how have you developed leadership skills within your roles? So Dawn, would you like to start?
I think the answer to have I always wanted to be a leader is definitely not. Originally, and I'm going back a while now, when I was first made a senior in the team I was in, I was made a senior with the caveat that I had to have a couple of people in the team reporting to me. And I had some healthy discussions with my boss about the fact that I did not want to manage people. He won those discussions. And as it turned out, it was really for the best, because I actually discovered I love looking after people. I love developing people. I really care about people's progression. Being that leader wasn't an immediate wish of mine, but something that I was bullied into. And I'm really glad that I was, because since that point, I've grown, I've developed, and now absolutely, yes, I want to be a leader. And developing those leadership skills was one of those things that was, again, it came a bit at a time. So I worked somewhere where they put on a program for new team leaders, which was really helpful, because I think what happens a lot is you're given a team to look after. You've never done it before and nobody tells you how to do it. And when you're at that level, actually, just basic things like HR guidance is something that you don't just automatically get given. So I was very lucky in that I did get some support there. And from then on, it's one of those things that's progressed over time. So as I became more senior, I went on more leadership development, away days and trips and things, and you get more and more skills given to you. But a lot of it comes with experience. And I think the key thing for me has always been to treat people how I want to be treated. People react differently and respond differently to different leadership styles. I've worked for good managers and bad ones. And I try my hardest to not be a bad manager. I try to look after people the way I wanted to be looked after. And that translates then into that leadership piece, having the vision and being able to steer people to where we want to be and steer the business to where we want to be, because leadership isn't just about people, but it's also about the business and where you're taking it. And a lot of that, I think, just developed over time and experience and knowing where I wanted to go.
Great. So yours was very much a leadership was thrust upon you case.
Yeah.
And Anne, how about yourself? What do you think about, have you always wanted to be a leader?
I think my answer to this is probably slightly similar to Dawn's, in that it would be no, because I didn't really ever think about it, if I'm honest. I think when I set out in my first career, it's quite a solitude career being a barrister. It's quite isolationary, if I'm honest. You're very much just operating at an individual level. So moving from that into the world of the Big Four was just very different for me anyway. I also feel like now there's much more awareness around leadership there's much more information out there about concept of being a leader than probably existed when I started working. And would very much to echo Dawn's comments around, you do almost fall into it in terms of, it wasn't quite thrust upon me as emphatically as Dawn set out, but as you move up into more senior roles, the expectation is that you manage teams. But managing a team and leading a team are two very different things. And I think for me, I've almost come to learn that, as opposed to almost by accident, I suppose, as opposed to design. But around reflecting on, especially in the last few years, so since I made senior manager director level, I suppose, is where I really started to think about it, because I'm in a client facing role and you become responsible for, your team, your client engagement team on the ground. You're facing off to the client and you're managing upwards. I think a lot of people always think it's a downwards facing thing, and it's really not. It's downwards, outwards, upwards. You've got to be fully rounded. And I think I've definitely learned a lot from good leaders that I've worked for, but also junior colleagues who I really respect in terms of the leadership attributes that they have. And yes, you can go on leadership training courses and things, and I found that really helpful in terms of reflecting on, for example, what comes out when you're under stress, right? If you're in a stressful situation, how do you start to behave? How does your leadership style change in those sorts of scenarios? Picking yourself up on that is really helpful. So to have some external training and just the time to step back and reflect on that, I think has been important. But overall, it is about recognizing your style isn't always going to suit everyone. So there's always this conflict between be an authentic leader, be yourself, but also we work with people. We're a professional services organization, and people don't always align with your style and so on and so forth. But I think the important thing is about being able to recognize that, being able to tune into people. And I think Dawn's point around just the sheer joy that comes from coaching and developing people it's so amazing to see your team grow in skills, in confidence, and develop their own leadership skills. I guess we probably ought to think about it a bit more deliberately, and I see that happening much more now. I think for me personally, it was definitely by accident as opposed to design.
I think you and Dawn both brought up some great points about treating people how you'd like to be treated, but also the fact that people are complex. So what works for one person might not work for another person. So the next question is, what challenges have you faced as you've become more senior in your career? Have you had any negative experiences, such as mansplaining, being undermined, or isolating language, such as some women find that when men overuse sports analogies, if they are not in the know, then they are isolated from the discussion going on. So Anne, would you like to go first with this?
I think at a high level, what I've learned is it's hard. And I don't think you realise how hard it is until Dawn's point around experience. The more you experience it, and the more you realise certain challenges that come up with being a leader, you realise it's difficult. It's very rewarding. It's absolutely rewarding, but it is quite difficult. I think I've found the more senior I've got, I've realised, and nobody really tells you this, but I've realised it can be quite emotionally draining at times. You've got to recognise, and I think give yourself the time to reflect on that and take a time out emotionally, because I think you kind of get used to doing work, as it were, and outputs and deliverables and so on. But I think once you step into being that rounded leader, it takes a different type of skill set, and that is much more emotionally driven, I think, is what I've found. And that does bring challenges. So it brings challenges around you, as we've talked about, dealing with people, and so some of the things that come up with that. But yeah, absolutely. I've dealt with quite material challenges, I would say, with clients, hostile client environments, things that have been said to me and so on. And I think back when I was more junior, there were times I raised it and things did get dealt with. When I raised it within KPMG, there were other times where I raised things and I probably was a bit disappointed with how they were dealt with. And I think, speaking really candidly, on some things I regret that I didn't raise it, that I was silent on things that affected me or behaviours I observed. And that's definitely something I've carried forward and am a lot more vocal about now, and try to be a lot more vocal within my teams as well. On the mansplaining and sports analogies and stuff, I mean, yes, that does sometimes happen. On the sports thing, I think it's quite a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think it's almost assuming sometimes that women aren't into sports, and actually sometimes women are really into sports. Like, so I think we've got to kind of take that in a bit more of a balanced view. But it is really about, I think for me now, education. So as part of the other hat I wear is, of course, I lead IT for Future. And one of the things we've been looking at recently with Liz Jessup, who's of course our IT for Future development lead, is around how do we engage better with our male colleagues. And we're looking at shaping an allied advocate programme. And again, I think for me, it comes from having the recognition of certain things and ways that you may behave and the impact that may have on others. I think once we create that awareness and recognition, it will be a positive move forward. It's difficult, I guess, overall, but also immensely rewarding.
I understand what you mean about needing to also get men in on this, and women can like sports. I personally am a very big fan of basketball myself. So Dawn, what would you like to say about this question or anything that Anne has brought up?
So for me, I think I'm quite lucky in the fact that I was brought up to be incredibly independent, and my dad always describes me as I won't suffer fools. And for me, having any negative experiences because of my gender, I've tended to be quite oblivious to, purely because it's been a case of that person is being an idiot, but I've never considered it in a gendered way. So I won't stand for, I absolutely will not tolerate that kind of behaviour. I've always shut it down automatically. But it's only when I reflect backwards that I realise it's been a gendered approach, and that's why it's happened. So I've been very lucky, I think, in being very oblivious to it throughout my career. I had a recent example. I was in a call with some colleagues and I started to raise a topic, and two men both started chorusing something to me to kind of negate my point of view. I shut them down, made a bit of a joke, moved on, continued to make my point, and didn't really think anything of it until a colleague of mine who was in the same meeting started typing, and he started typing mansplained to me on Teams. And if he hadn't done that, it would not have occurred to me that that was what had just happened, because to me, those people were idiots. And I shut them down, explained why they were being idiots, and we moved on. So I have been very lucky in that I don't see that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it is the way I was brought up. But I think what's really, really important, and I see this very much so in KPMG because it's so recognised, is the importance of having a role model who you can look at and see that they are there and they have gone through this and they've made it to whatever point you want to get to. For me, it was less about seeing female leaders and more about seeing leaders with, you know, a bit of a louder personality, because I'm not really a shrinking violet. Those of you who know me will know I am not backwards in coming forwards. But everybody needs a different role model. And I think particularly for women, a lot of people find it difficult to be loud in an environment where, not loud, but to make their voice heard in an environment where there are a lot of men. And again, I would strongly recommend the oblivious approach because it means that you stop second guessing yourself. But absolutely, on reflection, I can see quite a few occasions where that's happened in my career. And I'm lucky that I won't tolerate that kind of behaviour and have just been in a position where I've been able to shut it down and move on. But then equally, back at the start of my career, when my professional self-esteem probably wasn't as strong, there are things that happened then which were appalling, absolutely appalling. And I look back and I wonder how that person could have even thought about saying the things that he did and how I let him get away with it. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for being courageous and growing. And there's a lot of challenge out there, definitely.
That's a really good point as well. I think at least within KPMG, we are really big on having that courage to speak up. We have our ethics champions, and there really is that culture of it is okay to speak up if something happens and you know you're in an environment where you won't face negative repercussions because of it. So our next question is, why do you think there are so few women getting to director level and above? It's a bit of a tough question, but What is your input on that, Dawn, as somebody who has recently been promoted?
It's an interesting one, this, because it gets asked a lot. I get asked it in interviews. I was asked it, I think, when I came here and interviewed for the role, what it's like being a female senior leader and why there's less people and how to encourage more people to get to this point. And I think it's a really nuanced question. There are a lot of people in completely different scenarios and parts of their life. But for me, I think one of the key reasons is actually it's only been the norm over fairly recent years, and these things actually take time to change. So part of it is as more women get more experience, which tends to come with age, they're moving into these more senior levels, and I think it just takes a bit of time for that to filter through. It is unusual to see sort of a female dominated board, but it is getting better and we're starting to see more and more representation. And I do think it is just down to that switch that happened many years ago now, where people, women started to be recognised as being as capable as men. And it's taking that time to work through. And part of it as well is people's perceptions of self. So I think a lot of older women would never have seen themselves, or women who've been in work for long would never have seen themselves in that position. Whereas younger women coming up through, what's there to stop them? Why would they not be? And therefore they head in that direction. But I think there's a lot of other things there. Of women and men, women tend to be the people who have children. And therefore, even though not every woman has children, there are a lot of challenges there. I understand from my colleagues where they've had children, they've gone on maternity leave, and you have those gaps in career. And that, I think, slows things down as well. And people's priorities change when people have families, men and women, their priorities change and their focus changes. So I think there are a few different things in there, and it's not sort of a one size fits all. This is why women aren't as prolific in the director space as perhaps we should be.
You bring up some really great points in there, points we've also touched upon in our other episodes, such as the parenthood one, about how we as a company can support women who might want to come back to the workplace after a career break, and such as our pathway to promotion one, where women tend to not self-advocate. There are many layers to this, like you suggested. It isn't just a one box fits all. There's one reason why women aren't becoming a director and above. So, Anne, what do you think about the discussion that Dawn has just had?
I think it's changing. I think part of that is, as a firm, we are focusing on this. And particularly with IT's Her Future, having created a critical mass, as it were, at that junior level, for them people to be able to progress upwards. If I reflect on when I was in law, I think one of my reflections coming to consulting was the conversation has started. It wasn't, we absolutely weren't where we needed to be. I'm going back 7-8 years now, but one of my reflections was, hang on a minute, like we're actually talking about this, whereas I've just come from a profession where it literally was not even considered to be a thing. We all knew it was very male dominated at the upper levels, but no one ever really talked about it, let alone how are we going to actively address it. And I think I've definitely seen that move forward within KPMG. I've gone through the senior manager, the director and the partner process now, and I've sat as part of the forums where we discuss promotion readiness and things. We are absolutely got our eye on this as a firm. So I think things are heading in the right direction and it's changing. And I'm sure Dawn would agree in terms of, the cohort that you've just gone through with in terms of the director process. Of course, there are challenges that exist, right? Because we can't turn a blind eye to the fact that everywhere we look and every piece of research we read does denote that actually things are somewhat stacked against us, because we are operating within a structure, a societal structure more broadly, which has historically not been set up, nor does it favour women. I think my reflection on this personally would be, the things point Dawn made around the confidence and the courageousness that also comes with having the experience. I think my other reflection personally has been, because I did come from a technical background, and one of the things I did absolutely, I think, used to have a lack of confidence about or question myself on was, there are all these men quite a lot older than me at times around, they're so deeply technical and they know so much, and I'm never going to be able to bring that to the table, and so on and so forth. And it did kind of riddle me, if I'm honest, when I was B grade. I think it stuck with me when I made C to B. Like, I don't think I quite pushed for that promotion, because I was like, well, actually, I've got to know all these things. And what I've learned, and once I learned it for myself, I think I definitely played to my strengths. And that was that I bring other things to the table, and I am technical to a sense, but I don't want to be a technical SME. That's why I've not chosen that career path. But I have other strengths that I bring to the table. And I think once I started playing to those strengths and recognizing that, I definitely saw my career do better and progress better, and I felt better. I think it also made me a better leader and a better advocate on behalf of my team and on behalf of women as part of IT Serve Future. And I think the other point around women making it through to director and beyond is the role model point. And this isn't just, it's important to have female role models, absolutely. And I think it's important to recognise the skills that women bring. But if I look at who I've looked to support me in my career and pushing through, a lot of them have been men who have been really great advocates. My IT Serve Future mentor, James Osborne, who I picked up when I was a B grade, has been really pivotal to just having that person I can talk to if I've got a challenge on a program, on a client engagement, promotion, just things that are going on. It's been really great to have informal and formal mentors, role models, and they don't have to be women. I think they have to be people who possess the attributes that you respect as a leader. And I think we need to keep pushing on those things, and then we will get the change that we do need to get. And I think it is happening. One of the things that came up when we did the IT Serve Future roundtables this year was around people didn't quite understand early enough how to get to director, like what needed to happen, how to get to partner. And so one of the things we've done is set up journey to partner, journey to director sessions to just talk openly about that process. I can attest to the fact that I didn't really know about these promotion processes until I was in that grade looking for the next role. So the sooner we can get our junior female colleagues thinking about that and readying themselves for it, we will see that step change, and we are definitely progressing towards it, particularly in technology. We are.
I think it's why it's so important we are doing the podcast like this, to shed light on female leadership, and our episode on promotions as well, because before having these conversations, I knew very little about it. I don't think I would have been able to give an answer about what the promotion process looks like. This is why conversations like this are so important, especially the conversations about the role models. I think it is important to have a role model that you see yourself in. And although I am a woman, I'm a lot more than just a woman. So there may be a female leader, but I'm not going to look up to her just because she's a female. She might not reflect the qualities that I think I have and that I believe in.
I think that's a common misconception, actually, to your point around, and we see this a lot. Liz and I are quite conscious that we've got to look at the intersectionality point as well when we look at women in tech. And it comes up quite a lot that if you're that single person in the room who's from a minority background, that you're expected to carry the weight of that entire demographic. And similarly with women, and actually people are individuals. Just because someone's a woman, as you've said, does not mean that I would aspire to be that person. And we've got to be much more, I think, mature in the way we have those conversations.
Dawn, would you like to add anything onto this conversation?
Just to echo that, I think it is really, really important to have positive role models that are both male and female. And it's absolutely not kind of all men are terrible kind of thing, because absolutely, to Anne's point, I have a mentor here in KPMG who is male, and he has been endlessly supportive, and I really respect him. I love his approach. He's really helpful. It's about having advocates for us, rather than people who are negative and perhaps have kind of old-fashioned, outdated views. And I think it's very important. One of the things that I think initially when people started talking about women being senior and women role modelling, for me, I was a bit like, well, I don't want to sort of join a group of all women. That I like a mix. I like people from all sorts of different backgrounds and styles. And it's that sort of that positive approach, which I actually found quite challenging to begin with. And now I'm a massive fan of. I've realised and it's filtered through what it actually means. But certainly having that diverse support and having men and women involved in the conversations is really key.
This leads on really well to my next question, which is, how do you think the IT sector is evolving, and do you think it is becoming more diverse and inclusive? So Dawn, would you like to carry on?
Absolutely. The IT sector is becoming more diverse and inclusive. It is still male dominated. I think we are shifting the dial a little in that space. But I think that's the same if you look across a lot of different industries and a lot of different areas, not just technology. Areas such as engineering and the like have traditionally been very male dominated. And there's a lot of work being put into STEM for women, and really making people aware of what's available to them. I think I really, really hope, and I do believe, that gone are the days of schools where the girls got put into home ec and the boys got sent to play football. And we got kind of stereotypes stamped on us from a very young age. And I think that has changed and is continuing to change. I still do see a distressing amount of people dressing their girls in pink and their boys in blue. But I do think that mindset is changing, and from an early age, it's really important that people aren't putting their kids in boxes and they're letting their children find their own way. And I think that we're seeing that now as people grow up and get older. People are choosing more varied careers. They're more aware of what their options are. I still think there's a long way to go, but I think as things continue to evolve and change, that disparity of different genders and different careers will continue to dissipate. Certainly, we're seeing, as Anne mentioned previously, people from different backgrounds. You don't have to have studied computer science to work in technology. We've got a lot of chemical engineering graduates, for example. And so there's a lot of different aspects and different approaches that people can bring. And people's personalities, whether that's gendered or not, people take different directions to the roles. So they may not go straight to university. They may do an apprenticeship. They may go and get a job and then get a degree later in life. I think all of those different routes are becoming more and more accepted now. So we are seeing change. It's slow, but we're definitely seeing change, and it's definitely bigger than it used to be. There are a lot more women in tech than there used to be, and long may that continue.
You make a really good point about change and just the path that you can have into a job. Even before I started uni, it felt like you do your A-levels, you go to uni, you get a job. But even now, with my friends and their siblings, they're considering other courses that I didn't even know of 5-6 years ago. And I think it is really great to push these alternate routes, because university isn't for everyone. Some people need different learning methods, different skills, such as apprenticeships or more hands-on methods. So Anne, how do you feel about the IT sector and its evolution?
I think my view is slightly coloured by, the fact I came from a completely different sector before, but I think the tech sector has been much more forward thinking. We probably had the benefit of that actually more than other sectors. We started having the women in tech conversation much sooner than other industries did. And I think we've been able to benefit from the momentum that's given us, and we've seen that in the KPIs for IT's the Future, for example. That momentum needs to continue. And as we've talked about, it needs to continue into the senior grades. Now, I think that's definitely the next step in terms of young females feeling like a career in STEM or a career in something else leading to then a technology career, feeling comfortable that's something for them and they see it. I think a lot of work and progress has been made in that area compared to other industries. So I think we're seeing that level of diversity, but what we're not seeing as quickly as we would like to, but I think the momentum is at the senior levels. So I think we've got a lot to be proud of within the tech sector. I think now the question, or at least what I see more broadly, is we've advanced to the point where we know we need to keep a handle on increasing the gender diversity point. But I think, to Dawn's point, we're also looking at things like, well, actually, not everybody wants to be put in a gender box, for example. What about the intersectionality point? What about, ethnic diversity? And so it's the diversity and inclusion conversation is broadening out. And now I think it's going to be how we recognise all forms of diversity while still progressing the gender point. Don't get me wrong, there is a lot still to be done. And actually, one of the conversations I've been having with Liz around our FY23 planning, along with our exec sponsor, Lisa Hennigan, is around how do we try and turn that dial now on the progression and promotion of women into the senior roles.
I think your point about how the tech sector is so fast-paced has helped the recognition and getting more women involved. As I was talking to some of my friends who are still within the chemistry sector, and I was mentioning this podcast and some of the discussions we would be having, and they were like, but why do you need to be having them? And it just sort of hit me that I was like, how can you not see that this is an important thing that needs to be discussed? Whereas at work, the conversations we are having are more around this inclusion, this diversity, promoting people who might not have otherwise been seen before. And it was quite a stark contrast for me to have witnessed. So the final question I'm going to ask you both today is, what advice would you give about how to be a successful leader in the workplace? So Anne, would you like to go first?
The first piece of advice I would give here would be around recognizing that you as an individual will have attributes that only you as an individual can bring to the table. And I think when we talk about authentic leadership and bringing yourself to work, that's what we mean. And we all have development areas and we all have strengths. I think my advice would be, to be a successful leader, you've got to have that time, and it might be training, but to have that self-reflection on, how do I behave? What type of leader am I currently? What type of leader do I want to be? And how do I make the steps to get there? But it's not a one size fits all. And I think that is the beauty of KPMG. We have different styles of leadership because we have such a range of people. So I think that would be my first bit of advice, just to take a bit of time to reflect on the type of leader you want to be and the type of person that you are, because that's what comes through in our leadership style, right? It is our personality, whether we like it or not, whether we try to be robotic or not. You can't really do that and be a leader. And I think that my second piece of advice would be, play to your strengths. Like, everybody's got something to bring to the table. I think the more time we spend focusing on our strengths, and of course recognizing our development areas, whether those are technical skills you want to build or the softer side of things, having the confidence and the courage, to Dawn's point, around, you're here for a reason. You are part of a great firm here. We do amazing work for our clients. Have the courage and recognition of what that brings, play to your strengths. And I think once you've got that confidence, you'll be able to set a great example for others in the firm, and that will really move people forward.
Great, thank you. And Dawn, what would your advice be?
I 100% agree with Anne, know yourself. And I'm a massive proponent of bringing your whole self to work. It's really, really important that we see a different mix of people and personalities and backgrounds and approaches, because everybody is different. So to be a successful leader, we need to have representation from every area and every type of person. I think it's also really important to have a vision. It doesn't need to be world dominating, but you need to have an idea of where you want to go and what you're about and what you want to do. It's very important to build a network. So having people that you can gel with, people who understand you, so that you've got trusted people around you, but also so you've got people who know who you are and what you do and what your strengths are. So that perception piece is actually really key. And it's not just perception in terms of, oh, Dawn's a bit loud, but it's perception in terms of, actually, Dawn really knows her stuff around data, for example. So the more people that you get to know, the bigger your network, the better your perception and your strength in terms of contacts and reach. I also think it's really important to look after your people. If you look after your people will look after you. And at the end of the day, we're here to develop the next generation and to point people in the right direction and to bring them up and promote them. So for me, that's really, really key. I also, in terms of going back onto the network side of things, think that having a mentor is really not to be underestimated. The It's Her Future programme has a huge mentoring programme with people from all over the business, and it is great to speak to somebody who's not in your area, who has a different viewpoint, who's been here for longer if you're new, or who's come from somewhere else that you're interested in. I think it's great to get different perspectives and different inputs.
Thank you so much, Anne and Dawn, for talking with us today. It was really great to hear your insights, and I hope those listening have felt encouraged to aspire to be leaders one day. If you think a career within tech or KPMG is for you, please go to our website, www.kpmgcareers.co.uk. And if you wish to reach out to IT's Her Future to ask any questions, if you have any topics you think we should cover, the email's itsherfuture@kpmg.co.uk. Thank you for listening.